Hey there, Neo Nerds. This is Matt. I'm coming at you here with a new build idea that we have. This is actually an idea that I've had for a while that I wanted to hook up in my house. And for building this, we're going to actually use an AWS IoT button along with an instance of Neo, and we're going to build this cool little app. So basically, here's the quick summary of the use case. My wife and I, we have a cat, and one of the chores we have to do on a pretty regular basis is clean the litter box. So sometimes it's hard to remember when's the last time we cleaned the box, who cleaned it last. We want a reminder to know when to do it next. Kind of one of those out of sight, out of mind things that you don't want to forget for too long. So we're going to use this button and actually use the button to keep track of when the box was cleaned last, and then use Neo to figure out if it's been long enough since it's been cleaned. We're going to send ourselves a little reminder text to do it. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this. There's going to be a blog post associated with this that's going to have some written instructions, so I'm going to kind of power through this pretty quick. But feel free to pause the video, check out the blog post. The instructions for doing that will be on here, and obviously there's a lot of different directions you can take this. But first step, obviously, is going to be to actually get this button. So it's available on Amazon. It's a AWS IoT button. They're like 15 bucks. There's a first generation or second generation. Either one's fine. I have the first generation here, so we're going to use that one for this. Go ahead and order it on Amazon, and make sure you get the IoT button, not the dash buttons. The dash buttons are the ones that like buy you laundry soap and all that stuff. So we want the programmable IoT button instead. So I got my button here. This is a screencast, so you can't see it, but I promise you I'm holding it in my hands. First generation, it looks just like this right here. And the first thing we have to do is actually set it up. So I'm going to go into my AWS console here. You see at this point I don't have anything. So the way you get here is you do the IoT core service, and once you get here, you'll see that there are no things yet. So the first thing I need to do is register a new thing. It's going to be a new button. I'm going to create a single thing. I'm going to call it Matt button, or I'll call it Litterbox button. Litterbox button. I'm not going to mess with types or groups or anything. You can use those if you want to organize a lot of different devices, but we don't need to do that here. Certificates, cool. So there's a couple different options here. The best way to start really is to just do this create certificate. This is going to create a public-private key pair for the button, and also then a certificate that's signed by those. We do need to save these files. We're going to need these files for configuring the button and also the Neo instance to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and save these three files right here. This is the cert, the public key, and the private key. I'm going to save those, and we're also going to need the root certs. This is basically the root certificate that Amazon signs the certificate with. So we need to save it. There's a couple different ways that these work. You can read through this documentation here. I'm going to use the legacy endpoint, the VeriSign. It's the way that I've set it up in the past, so it's pretty straightforward. So I'll use that. I'm going to save that, and you'll see where we're going to need those a little bit later. So I have those certs. Make sure to activate the certs here. You could do that in a later step if you forget to do it now, but it's easier just to click that button right there. Move along. Okay, we're going to add a policy to this button. So I already created a policy. You'll see it's a pretty straightforward policy. It basically just allows all the IoT actions on any resource. So pretty open, just for testing and building this. It's going to be easy. Obviously, if this was a production, you'd want to kind of fine-tune this a little bit more, but this is just to make sure that it works. So cool. I'm going to register my thing, and ta-da, we are done. So we have our Litterbox button here. So AWS now knows about the button. We still need to actually configure the button itself. So to do that, there's one other thing we're going to have to look at, and you're going to want to go to the thing itself and then click this Interact tab and record this HTTPS API endpoint. You're going to need that. So because what we're about to do is actually configure the button. So the way this works is you hold down the button itself for about 10 seconds, and it'll start blinking light blue. And then once the light blue light starts blinking, what it's going to do is it's going to set up its own wireless network. And so I'm going to join that network now, which means once you're on that network, you won't be able to kind of navigate around the AWS console. So you want to make sure that you are it's all set up there. So I'm going to switch to the network here. It's going to look like button configure me something. It will have a password, and the password is the last 8 characters on the back of the button. So you turn the button over and look at the last 8 characters, and that's going to be your Wi-Fi password for that. So the way you set this up is you actually go to 192.168.0.1. It's kind of the button admin panel, and again, you can read the blog post for these instructions or just follow the AWS documentation, and you're going to be good there. So I'm going to join my wireless network here. I actually pre-joined it earlier, so I don't need to do it again. That's my Wi-Fi. I'm going to provide the certificate and private key that I just downloaded before. So for the cert, I'm going to use the certificate there, and for the private key, I'm going to make sure I select my private key. Okay, endpoint subdomain. This is actually going to be from this endpoint earlier. So the subdomain is this thing. These whatever 10, 12 characters, whatever they are, in front of the. Ignore the ATS part. So just this string of characters here is going to be your subdomain. I'm going to throw that in there, and your region is going to be specified here. So I'm using the US East 2 region. So I will select that. Oh, I can't select that. Great. Let's type it. Okay, so there we go. So then that's your final endpoint. Again, this one doesn't have the -ATS. That's that legacy thing that I was talking about before. Not a big deal. We're going to configure that. Okay, it's now the setup is done. So at this point, the button will blink white a couple times, I think, sort of indicating that, hey, it's all set up, it's connecting to the wireless, and you should do that. So you can switch back to your normal Wi-Fi, and I will do that now. And then we can actually test the button here. There's a cool way to test this just from Amazon itself, just to make sure that everything's working. So if you actually go to test, we can subscribe to a new topic, and we'll do IoT button, and then just any button we want. That's what the plus does there. We're going to subscribe to all these buttons, and when I push this button, I'm going to press it here. It's going to blink white a couple times. It's going to join my wireless network, and then in theory, if it works, we should see the button press be registered somewhere down here, and ta-da, there it is. Cool. Okay, so we are good. Button is set up with Amazon. It's connected to our wireless network, so let's move on and let's get it connected to Neo. So to do that, I am in my Neo system designer here. So if you don't have a Neo account yet, make sure to go sign up for that. niolabs.com, you can get a free trial, sign up there. And yeah, so I have a system here for AWS Button. I'm going to create a new local instance of Neo, and I will call it litter box. All these defaults are fine. You can use HTTP, HTTPS, whatever you want. I'll just use this one for now. I'm going to make sure to copy my neo new command to the clipboard for that. I'm going to create that instance. I'm going to switch over to my terminal now. We're going to get into a little bit more of a terminal land here just for a little bit. And I am going to run the command that that local instance asked me to do. So I'm going to run that. It's going to pull down the necessary blocks just to get a basic Neo instance up and running. And it's going to put that in a folder called litterbox. So I will go into litterbox, and what I could do is, you'll see here, this is going to be a Neo project, so you see your blocks and your etc directory and all that. The one thing that I know I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to copy that cert and private key from earlier into this etc folder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I put in button, and it was the cert. I'll call it etc AWS cert.pem, and I need to also get the private key, and I'll call it private key.pem. And lastly, I will need the root cert that I downloaded to. That's that verisign thing. So I'll call that root cert.pem. Okay, cool. So now that all those are up and running, I can actually just run neod to get my Neo instance up and running here. And we see some logs here indicating that it started. And let's make this a little wider so we can read it. And we should be good. So from here on, Neo is running. We should be able to use the system designer from here on out, but our instance is running there, and we can do that. Okay, so we have a new instance. Let's go ahead and connect to it here. I am going to create a service that listens. This is going to be our litterbox service, so I'll call it litterbox reminder. The block we're going to actually use to connect to this button is the AWS IoT Mqtt Blocks. So we're able to make an MQTT connection to AWS and subscribe to the data there. So the subscribe block here, I'm going to go ahead and install that. So by clicking that, you'll actually see it's going to be installing the block into my environment here. If you want to check the logs, you'll see it kind of doing some work. Cool, so we are done. We are good here. So I'm going to bring this subscribe block into my service. I'm going to call this button presses. And configure the AWS stuff here. So we don't need access key. That's not used for MQTT. For the certificate, we have, what did I call that? I called it, well, I called it AWS cert.pem. So let's call that there. You can leave the timeout like that. Root CA, I called it root cert. I did good not using the defaults here. MQTT host, I'll do that one in a second. I think I did call that private key.pem. Okay. So MQTT host is actually going to be the same endpoint from before. So if you go into the thing, the AWS thing, and interact, you're going to use this endpoint here with one caveat. Since we're using the verisign, the legacy, we don't want the ATS on there. So remove the ATS from that. If you're using the other root certs and you want to install it in a different way, You can leave the ATS, but that's sort of a newer Amazon or newer AWS thing, just a new secure endpoint. The topic we want to listen to is going to be the same thing that we listened to before, IoT button. I put the plus there. This basically listens to all buttons. If you wanted to listen to just your one button, you can actually put your button's serial number instead of the plus there and listen to just the specific one. So if you had a bunch of buttons running, you could do that. But again, for this, we're just going to test it and do that. Cool, so we have that. And let's go ahead and just throw a logger on here and make sure things are all looking okay. So I'm going to connect those, save this, start this service up. And we're going to watch in the logger panel and make sure, okay, authenticate the pubkeeper. That means our service is started. I'm going to press the button. It's going to blink. And if all goes well, we should see a message pop up here in the logger saying the button was pressed. And there it is. Cool. So you see we have some cool information here. We know it was a single press. You can do some cool things with these buttons. You can double press them or long press them and get different types of behavior based on that. We can see how much battery is left. I think this starts at about 2 volts, so we're at 1.6 right now. Serial number of the button. Okay, so we're cruising. This is good. Okay, so the next step, what we want to do is actually we want to send us a text. So now we know basically this will log a message every time this button gets pressed. What we really want to do is we want to send a reminder if it's been long enough since the litter box has been cleaned last. So to do that, we're going to use a block called the signal timeout block, and we have to install this one. So I'll install this. Basically what this block does is it will receive a bunch of signals, and then if it's ever been a certain amount of time since a signal has been received, that's when it will emit a signal. So it's cool, it's useful to figure out like if a stream has gone dry or maybe a device has stopped reporting. It really only notifies signals if it's not getting signals. So like I said, use it a lot to figure out like if something stopped reporting, but in this case what we're going to do is we're going to use it to figure out if the litter box hasn't been cleaned. So if we haven't received a clean event in a period of time, then we're going to send a signal out saying, hey, this hasn't been cleaned in a while. So I'm going to add an interval. For testing purposes, I'm just going to set this to 30 seconds. You can leave group by blank. So obviously, for real, once we make sure this is all working, I'm going to want to set this to maybe like 2 days or whatever your preferred cleaning interval is. So I will have a timeout there, and I'm going to connect the button presses to that. Cool. So this will actually spit a signal out whenever it's been 30 seconds since the last clean. And since I did not check repeatable, which we don't want to check, it will only send one signal. If I check that every 30 seconds after it hasn't been cleaned, it'll send a 30-second reminder. We probably don't want that. That's a little overkill. Okay, last step is to actually send us a text message to when it's time to clean the box. So we're going to use Twilio to do that. I have the Twilio SMS block here that I will download and install to my instance now. I'm going to bring that guy on. Send reminder text is the name of it. I have already loaded my account token and SID and number into my environment variables here. That way I don't have to share them on the screencast and share my Twilio creds. You can get those from the Twilio console, so just go to twilio.com and they're all pretty available there. Our message is going to be, it's time to clean the litter box, with an exclamation mark. I will be the recipient. I'll put my number in here. We're going to save that and connect those there. I'm actually going to set this into debug log just so we can see when the message gets sent to make sure that it actually works. You're going to probably hear my phone jingle too, but okay, save that, restart this service, and we're going to open the logger up. And we still have the logger connected here, so we're going to see when the button gets pressed, and then 30 seconds after that we should get a text message saying it's time to clean the box. Okay, press the button. It's blinking white light right here. That's it, kind of waking up and then joining the wireless network. So these buttons are good for about 2,000 clicks, they say. So they pretty much stay asleep and then they wake up when you press the button. So you get about a 5-second latency between the press and the actual event coming through. Cool, okay, there's our event right there. Now we're going to wait the 30 seconds for this text message to get sent. And while we're waiting here, I guess I'll talk about maybe some future ideas I have for this. One of the things I want to do is actually make use of that different type of click, the single or double click, and maybe so when my wife cleans the box, she'll press it once, and when I clean the box, I'll press it twice, or I'll long press it or something. That way you can actually distinguish who is the one cleaning the litter box. We can use that information to maybe set up some kind of like scoreboard or kind of gamify a little bit, see who cleans the box more. It could be a little bit of a bragging rights thing in the household here. And I just got the text there. You hear my phone jingle, so that was it. We didn't get any message on the logger here, probably just because it's all good. Everything worked as expected, so there was no errors or anything. But I got the text, and it worked there. So I'm going to call this good. I'm going to go back to my signal timeout here and switch this over to 2 days. Save that, and stop and start this service again. and this is going to be running, and we are going to be good. So I guess just following up on the last thought, using the different people, so knowing who's cleaned the box last, you could even set this up to say maybe the reminder will only go to the person who hasn't cleaned the box more recently. So if I cleaned the box last time and it's time to clean it again, it'll go to her instead, and vice versa. So a lot of cool ways we can extend this, but this was a quick build idea. Like I said, there's a blog post with this. The link will be in the video description. And obviously, anytime, feel free to reach out to Neo. We're always here on this little blue chat icon here. Go ahead and drop us a line. We're happy to help troubleshoot, help come up with ideas, and walk you through anything. All right, happy building.